Hello everyone, welcome. In today's video we'll be covering the developer update for August 2025. This will be the update 9.2.0 which arrives next week into the PTB. Before we jump into this update, I'd like to premise that I am a killer main who plays a variety of killers mostly, but I also do play Survivor, and I'd like to keep my opinions as least biased as possible. I admit I'm a bit late to the party and I've already seen a few people's reactions to this, and that's what's actually made me want to do a video about this, seeing the changes and thinking, this is going to impact Dead by Daylight very so much. And also, I think this will be a vital turning point, especially with splitting the community, but I'll get into that a bit more later. So let's jump into the new features and changes. So first of all, we have the Slugging Reduction update. I'll go through each of these one by one, and basically explain my views on them as well as what they'll actually do. So first of all, if a survivor is left in the dying state for a total of 90 seconds during a match, they gain the ability to pick themselves up after fully recovering. So it's pretty self-explanatory. I do think 90 seconds is a lot of time, but again, without seeing this in the PTB, it's kind of hard to judge whether this is a fair amount of time or not. But I think it could have been worse. It could have been 60 seconds. But again, in certain situations, this may prove to not be a long enough time. So next, they've added the option to enable or disable this mechanic in custom games. Obviously, in stuff like tournaments, the killers need all the advantages they can get. Same with survivors, but I don't think they'd have any of these changes where it says disabled, the option to enable or disable this mechanic in custom games. Tournaments won't do any of this. And also, if you just want to have a game with your friends, I know it personally, if I'm going to do that, I'm going to turn these updates off. So yeah, that's why they've added this one. There's a note here that says perks that enable you to recover from the dying state, like Boon Exponential, will continue to function as before without needing to meet this requirement. Obviously that's fine. This was in the game before, everyone was pretty much fine with it, so it'll be so I'm fine with this. Next, gradually increases crawling speed for survivors who are left in the dying state. I can imagine this being pretty frustrating in certain situations. I think its intended purpose was so that if you were left on the floor to be slugged, the killer wouldn't return to you and know where you are because you would have crawled away. But obviously you still leave the trail of blood. Next, they've added the ability for survivors to recover while crawling, so you no longer have to press a button down, and recovery now occurs passively with no need to hold a button. They've updated several survivor and killer perks to account for these changes naturally. This is what the passive recovery will look like while crawling. So you no longer have to press a button down, and you can obviously crawl while recovering. And then this is what it will look like when you pick yourself up after being in the dying state for 90 seconds. Just a note, it doesn't say anywhere where you'll get endurance for this, so that's a good thing, unless they decide to add it later, obviously. So, dev note. When it comes to slugging, we know it can be frustrating if you're on the receiving end of it too often or for too long, but we also know that sometimes it's a smart move, so I think they've admitted here where it's obviously a strategy in tournaments and sometimes in casual games as well, especially at the higher ends of MMR, when the survivors are getting, gens done and you don't have that pressure on the map. Slugging's a good way to enforce that pressure, and it's not like it's uncounterable anyway. So I think this is pretty much confirmation of survivor bias, and them catering to survivors, basically crying that, well, there's a problem with slugging. But let's move on. This updated system acknowledges this, allowing the killer to slug occasionally when they feel like it's the right call, but will eventually kick in and swing in the survivor's favour if slugging is used excessively. A big part of this is also about making the experience of being slugged more pleasant, as much as being slugged can be, at least. The recovery changes in crawling speed will give you a bit more agency when down, so you aren't just holding a button and waiting for someone to come save you. I don't really know what they mean by this. More pleasant, it was a feature in the game before, all they've done is made it so you crawl a bit faster over time and you don't have to press a button down anymore. You're still on the ground waiting, ideally, for a survivor to come and rescue you. So my overall thoughts about this are, it's going to make situations where you have, maybe a flashlight, swift bully squad a bit harder, and especially anti-hook builds and sabotage builds where you may not be able to make it to a hook and you're forced to slug, as well as situations where it's not actually safe to pick up and they're lingering around. And obviously, while that's happening, you have the survivor trying to crawl away. It's going to be very frustrating, especially for new killers going up against experienced survivor squads. This is going to be very hard to play around. But while saying that, it is 90 seconds. So I think we'd have to wait to the PTB to see how this is going to affect overall gameplay. My overall opinion is that I don't really mind this change as much. I think maybe 90 seconds could be a bit too short of a duration, but then again, if it's genuine slugging, I think it's fair enough. So again, we'll have to wait and see what it's going to be like. So next point. This update is going to mean endgame slugging is no longer viable because they'll just pick themselves up while you're trying to slug other people, or they'll crawl towards the exit gates at a progressively faster rate, forcing a pickup, and that obviously means in some situations where if they have flashlights and it's not safe to do so, you'll be forced to either pick them up and potentially risk a flashlight save, or let them go and maybe focus on another injured survivor, or some killers will just let the pressure get to them and the survivors will get an easy escape because of this update. Also, I'd like to premise that slugging is a valid strategy that is used in tournaments. A lot of survivors, especially in recent tournaments, have commented, why is slugging allowed? Why isn't there any rules against this? It's because it's a valid strategy. It's in the game for a reason. Most killers, including me, will use it sparingly, but as a tactic, especially when the gens are flying a bit too much, you don't have that many hook stays, so you don't have the pressure you want, or in certain situations where, again, if it's a bully swift or anti-hook sabotage build users, slugging is a useful tactic. Not to say that I or any of the people or any of the gameplays even I've seen have abused this. Okay, moving on to the tunneling reduction update. As you can see, this is a major big update that is going to change a lot of things, so we'll go over it and take our time. So first of all, when a survivor is hooked, their hook status is hidden from the killer, and then when they're unhooked, there is no notification and their hook status isn't revealed immediately. So moving on, again, this is disabled once all generators are completed. Obviously at this point the game's already over unless you have an endgame build, so I guess it's only fair to not allow this to be in effect and allow you to get bullied even more in the end game. I think that would just be the nail in the coffin to most killer mains. Next of all, unhooked survivors gain the following effects for a limited time. So they get haste, endurance, which they already had. They haven't specified though if they're going to change the value amounts for these, although I doubt it very much. And as well as an elusive, a new status effect, which we'll cover just below in a second. There's now no longer collision with other players, so this includes both killers and... So this means there is no more killer body blocking and no more survivor body blocking, especially to abuse their endurance. So this will change, things like basement bubba, and especially survivors being altruistic and abusing their endurance, which is meant for them to, run away to somewhere safe and heal, and obviously outrun the killer if they're trying to get tunneled. So I can see this being a good thing, and I'm not too concerned with this, especially with the killer body blocking. It's fair enough, but again, it will make some strats like basement bubba virtually inviable. Next of all, they have immunity to killer instinct and seize the killer aura nearby. I don't have a problem with the immunity to killer instinct. If you don't know what killer instinct is, it's the orangey red spider mark showing the auras of survivors, and is activated by certain perks, add-ons, and killer powers. Like for example, Legion, when he goes into his power, you get Killer Instinct on all nearby survivors. However, seeing the killer's aura nearby, I know they've done the same for the killer, which we'll cover again in a second, but I think this is unfair. I don't see a need for this, especially when you have haste, endurance, and now elusive. I think with a good survivor, you'd be more than capable to outrun the killer and get away from him safely. These effects are lost when the affected survivor performs a conspicuous action. All these effects, except from a haste and endurance, are disabled once all generators are completed again, and the game's over unless you have an end game build. They've added a unique effect to the killer's hook state UI that indicates the last survivor you've hooked. So maybe there'll be a little marker next to the last survivor you've hooked. This will come into effect when we start getting down here, but let's continue for now. After completing a unique hook, so the same survivor is not hooked consecutively, killers get the following benefits. So they've tried to make it even with the survivor benefits they get. So they get bonus damage for the next generator kick. Again, this doesn't say an amount, so it could be as low as 5% added regression, or initial damage rather. Temporary haste status effect, again we don't know, this could be 5% haste, 7% haste, something low like that. Temporarily reveal survivors, so they said think base kit, barbecue and chili that have less or equal hook states than the hook survivor. I wouldn't think of this as base kit, barbecue and chili. I think of it as the 2v8 mode where you kick a generator and all survivor auras are revealed to you as long as they have less or equal hook states. Again, I personally would remove this, and where is it? Being able to see the killer's aura. I don't see a need for this. These effects are slightly lessened for the following killers, so the Blight, the Dark Lord, the Ghoul, the Hillbilly, and the Nurse. I see why they've done this, because obviously these are the killers that will be able to most quickly travel to killers highlighted, and also they're pretty meta killers, but I think they failed to take into account like killers that can teleport, like Sadako, the Unknown, etc, etc. Again, this will be one of those where we'll have to see how much they lessen the effects for these killers. I'm guessing the effects are already going to be pretty low, so for these killers they could just be next to nothing, while the survivors get possibly really good bonuses. But yeah, let's move on. Again, these effects are disabled once all generators are completed. So they've added some new effects that disincentivize tunneling. So these are the ones I really disagree with. If a survivor dies before 6 total hook states, so one survivor before you get 6 total hooks dies, all remaining survivors gain a repair speed bonus for the rest of the trial. So not for a certain amount of time, for the rest of the trial. Also, it doesn't say what repair speed bonus. Could be 5, could be 10, could be somewhere in between, less or even more. We just don't know. I personally would scrap this completely. Moving on. If the survivor that was last hooked is sacrificed or killed, generators cannot be regressed or blocked. I don't know if this means for the rest of the trial or for a certain amount of time. They haven't specified. I hope it's not for the remainder of the trial, because this would be absolutely unfair, especially when it's a case of, you're not hooking the survivor, you just have happened to run into them and they're on their final hook, and then you hook them or you mori them and now they're dead, and generators can no longer be regressed or blocked just because you got in the chase with the survivor, not necessarily tunneling them. Again, this is something I'd change at least and preferably remove completely. Next, they've added the option to enable or disable these new mechanics in custom games, obviously, and updated several killers and survivors perks to account for these changes. Naturally, a lot of this will change a lot of perks, and they'll need to find the way around configuring all of these changes with all the perks that will be affected. Also, I want to say a quick little side note before getting into the dev note. I'm seeing a lot of changes in this update where there's a lot of opportunity for bugs, just like in the last update. a lot of opportunity for bugs. Hopefully that's not the case, because I don't think the community will receive that very well, especially with what's been happening with behavior and how buggy the game has been recently. Now, not so much. I don't see many of the bugs or many of the complaining anymore. I think they fixed the majority of it. Obviously, they've kill switched a lot of perks which need to be kill switched, but that's not what we're covering in this video, so let's carry on. In the dev note, they said it's no secret that tunneling can be seen as an efficient way to play the killers. They've admitted it themselves, especially, again, going back to the slugging. It can be very efficient, especially when you haven't got any pressure and the gens are flying and you need to find some way to get that pressure. Maybe you're at, 2 generators left, 1 generator left, or even 3 generators left, and you haven't got many hooks. You need to tunnel someone out the game. In my view, they've had a sufficient time to play the match. They've enjoyed playing the match. They have that boost of, yeah, we're winning. And obviously you're there to win by any means necessary, not play with a rulebook. So if you need to tunnel out and kill a survivor without doing it maliciously, I think that's more than fine. I've done it in a few situations, although I do tend not to tunnel and slug and camp as much as I can, just because it's not really my playstyle, but I don't have a problem with people whose playstyles include it. Moving on, while this can be true, it's also true that the results of this can be frustrating for survivors. I think obviously this is very true. I think we've all seen it in videos, and maybe if you're a survivor main watching this, you've experienced this yourself. I can personally understand this, especially since I actually do play survivor. I don't just play killer, so I can see this. But I think there are measures and changes that could be made to this so that deliberate tunneling can be punished. Not just sometimes if it's consequential or accidental, because I think some of these are way too punishing and a bit of a weird decision of array of changes. Carrying on, this leads to trials ending too quickly for some, while leaving others to fend for themselves in the match that is now much more difficult. Again, sometimes this comes down to strategy, and to put it a bit blatantly, a skill issue. Obviously, if you're tunneling from second 1, especially with a good killer, I think the odds are in your favour. But I think, again, tunneling is counterable, and in some cases actually helps the survivors, depending on what builds you're running, and etc. The intention here is for both roles to feel the benefits and incentives that come from spreading hook states, aka going for a 12 hook, which, unless you're using, I'd say, S tier, A tier killers, is very hard. This also will make strategic killers and trapper killers and killers with a slow setup very hard to play, especially as they incentivize a 12 hook, which, if you're taking your time to set up at the start of the map, even with perks like Corrupt Intervention, you're really going to struggle with these new changes. On the one end, survivors have better opportunities to evade and reset after unhooks, while also limiting those tough situations where losing a survivor too quickly causes things to go south quickly and snowball. Again, I think the better opportunities to evade and reset after hooks, these are available in the base game we have right now with perks, and also it's what endurance and haste is for, and obviously with the new elusive stats effect we'll cover in a second. I think this is already possible. I think this is a bit of survivor hand-holding and bias right here. So yeah, carrying on. On the other end, killers are able to apply more map pressure. I don't think this is the case. Even with the haste, it's not going to be enough to push back against efficient teams covering ground post-hook and strengthening general aggression. I don't think the killer benefits, obviously they've tried to equal out the benefits to both. I think some of them need to be axed completely or reworked. I don't think the benefits are worth it, especially in some situations. One thing that you can take away from this is hook statuses being hidden from killers make securing a second hook a lot harder, since you can't see the progress, which again was a big strategy that was counterable, by the way. I think this makes securing a second hook a lot harder, obviously, since you can't see the progress, which was a strategy before. Obviously, if survivors are concentrating on gens, which is their fault, you can secure that second hook and it's a viable strategy, and you take opportunity of the survivor's mistake. But again, this is going to be a lot harder. Also, I'd like to say if gaining distance was a problem, there are perks like Borrowed Time and even No One Left Behind, which they can stack and make it so that the survivor has even more haste. I like to also note that I've seen a lot of people saying it's basic borrowed time for the survivors now. I don't think it's anything like that unless they're going to be extending the haste timer or changing the haste's percentage speed. I think as well, having no more collision with killers or survivors when unhooked means there's no more killer body blocking and no more survivor body blocking either, which is something people have looked over. So survivors, it's going to be a lot harder, if not impossible, to abuse their endurance they get from unhooking. A few questions I have for this, so especially in regards to a survivor dying before 6 total hook states, will the killer Will the killer be punished if the survivor decides to give up on hook before 6 states, aka they get hooked and they decide, oh, I'm going to give up on this game, I don't like how it's gone. If they die, will that mean that the killer will get punished by survivors having a repair speed bonus for the rest of the trial? I think it's still unfair, especially if the survivor has decided that and it's not the killer's fault and it's right at the start of the trial. And also that big thing is a lot of Swifts, especially bully Swifts, hide their names and run the same skins. I see this being a problem even with the last hook indicator, which could also lead to you dropping chases and not wanting to get a penalty for going after the wrong person, wasting time. What I mean by this is if you get in a chase with someone you've already hooked, or someone that their next hook will kill them and take them out of the game, you'd have to then drop that chase or make that decision there and then to get those negative effects against you. Okay, so next we're going to be covering the Elusive status effect. So this has added a new status effect that silences the grunts of pain and suppresses survivor aura, pools of blood and scratch marks while it's in effect. So the dev note is, to start, we'll be using this new stats effect as part of the tunneling reduction in here above, but plan to integrate this into relevant existing perks down the road to make their descriptions more streamlined. Arguably, the easiest way to look at this is a survivor version of undetectable, in that when it's active, you know you're in stealth mode. I think this is a good stats effect, especially for where it says obviously planning to integrate this into relevant existing perks and perks down the road to make their descriptions more streamlined. I think I don't really mind this too much, in my personal opinion. Next up, the Tomes lore update. I'm not too bothered about this. Tomes are something I'm not too concerned about, especially the lore. I don't really follow it. The animations are pretty cool, but otherwise I don't really follow it. So, they've updated the Tomes menu to feature new tomes and accompanying lore alongside each chapter release, so they do this every chapter release anyway, and new lore is unlocked each week within the active tome. And there's a dev note here that says, ever since we've reworked the tome, we've seen how much you've yearned for more lore. We're happy to share that beginning with 9.2.0, lore is back. While previously lore was tied to challenges, we want all players to have a chance to immerse themselves in these stories, so we've shifted to a weekly unlock, not linked to any quest completion. With what I've said about the tomes, I do again have seen some of the stories. I think some of them was School Merchant story, or the lore behind her. It was pretty cool to follow along, and I hope to look at some more lore, so I'll definitely be checking this out, but it's not a big focus on this update. So next of all, moving on, the Shape update. This is going to be a big one. So what I'm going to do is go and read through all of his changes, as there's quite a lot, and then give my takes at the end. So they've replaced Evil Within with 2 modes that can be toggled with a button press. So you have Stalker mode, where you have a 4.2 meters per second movement speed, you gain undetectable and can stalk survivors. And then Pursuer mode, so you get 4.6 meters per second movement speed, a 24 meter terror radius, an increased vault speed, and bonuses to lunge range, break speed, and stun recovery, and you cannot stalk survivors. Once the stalk meter is full, Evil Incarnate mode can be triggered at will, granting the following effects for a limited time. Before we get into it, noting that survivors no longer become exposed via Evil Incarnate. So, he has a 4.6 meters per second movement speed, he gains a 40 meter terror radius and an increased vault speed, unlocks Slaughtering Strike ability. So this is his ability that he gains with Evil Incarnate. So you hold the power button to charge his ability, reducing movement speed. Press the attack button while charging to quickly lunge forward, adjusting your angle as you move. The length of the lunge depends on charge time. If a survivor enters the killer's attack range while lunging, they're knocked into the dying state. This ability can be used to destroy pallets. Unlocks the ability to grab and kill or perform a regular Mori on survivors who would die the next time they're hooked. They've also adjusted some of the mechanics of stalking itself. So they've removed the limited pool of stalk points survivor, so you can now stalk a survivor for as long as you want, is what I take away from this, with no cap on it. They've reduced the stalk range to 32 meters. I reckon this might be increased. I'm seeing this as a bit too small, but then again we'll see how it plays out. And they've also removed the distance modifier, which I quite like, and I think is a fair trade-off for 32 meters, but again I'd like to see this increased. And then moving while stalking has increased movement speed, but incurs a reduced stalk rate. I'm absolutely fine with this. And then finally they've reworked his add-ons. This means no more Tombstone and pretty much reworking all of his add-ons. I personally see including Scratched Mirror going as well in that. And then just to show you, this is his Slaughtering Strike. So again, so you can see him charging up the ability here, lunging and downing the Dwight. This is basically coup de grace, but I do have a problem with them making the Shape Michael Myers a lunge killer. Obviously in the films and the lore, Michael doesn't run, Michael doesn't lunge like this, and I think they could have incorporated this ability just by giving him maybe a bit more speed instead of a lunge. Again, we'll have to see how this plays out. I just don't think this fits into Michael Myers' lore quite as well as I'd liked. And then down here we have a dev note. I'll read this and then get into a bit more of my opinions about this. So, by moving away from the linear Evil Within tiers, we wanted to give players more tools that they can use to adapt to each trial's unique situations while keeping the core of what makes him the Shape. I disagree with this last part, although I do see how they've kept the concept of his 3 Evil Within tiers, just made it a bit more situational and made it so you can swap between them, and they have their different served purposes. Moving on, Slaughtering Strike makes for a high threat offensive attack, offering up an insta-down opportunity. So basically, the survivors get exposed during this attack, with an extended lunge that's particularly effective in loops and for ripping through pallets quickly. So like the Pig's ability that also breaks pallets. Next, understanding his kit has changed quite a lot. We've done a pass on nearly all of his add-ons, again, reworking many of them and axing some of them to offer more unique effects. In particular, for those who prefer his old playstyle, the fragrant tuft of hair will change Evil Incarnate to function like old Myers, so offering an exposed effect and no Slaughtering Strike. So after a bit of reflection overnight on this, we pretty much still have the 3 tiers. And as I said, they're a bit more situation and you can swap between them. So Stalker mode being the first tier, where obviously you can stalk, you're undetectable, but you have a slower movement speed. Pursuer mode, so basically tier 2, where you have a bit more movement speed, you have a terror radius, an increased vault speed, bonuses to lunge range, which is a bit of a weird one, but I don't mind it. Bonuses to lunge speed, which I'm guessing means that in Stalker mode his lunge is basically like the tier 1 lunge. Breaking speed and stun recovery, and cannot stalk survivors, and then his tier 3 basically being the Evil Incarnate, with an added ability of Slaughtering Strike. Overall, I think I have mixed opinions on this. I like what they've done with his modes. I just don't like this whole lunge thing. I think they could have incorporated an insta-down ability differently while keeping to the Michael Myers lore. It's a small nitpick. It's just something I don't really like. I think even though all of us were asking for a Shape rework, this isn't really what we were expecting, but I'm willing to give it a chance. I'm not completely against it, so again, in the playtest, I'll have to play this and see how it is compared to the old Survivor. Also, a side note, I like to put out a video about maybe Tombstone Myers. Moving on, those are the main updates out of the way, but we've still got a few more ones to go. So the clown, what they've done is increase the activation of the afterpiece antidote. The afterpiece antidote is the one you throw down and it speeds you up, so they've increased the activation time of it. I personally feel it was fine, and this didn't need a change, but this is why you see they've done this. They've increased how long the afterpiece tonics hindered effects lingers after leaving smoke. So this is the one that hinders survivors, aka slows them down. I feel this was way too short anyway. But overall, we'll have to see how it plays out because we don't have the exact values yet. So moving on to the dev note, we've heard your feedback that the clown's easier to activate haste can make instigating and maintaining chases less interactive for survivors. I don't think the changes to clown were that big, but I think this all depends on how much they're going to actually increase the activation time of the afterpiece antidote. But moving on, that coupled with nerfs to his purple bottles has pushed players towards this frustrating tactic. Then buff his purple bottles a bit, because I think the activation time for the afterpiece antidote is right where it should be. Maybe you can increase the activation time a bit, but otherwise it was perfect. To make both bottles feel like viable options without being too oppressive, we've adjusted the values of their most impactful qualities to strike a balance between pre 9.1.0 values and live values. So overall, I don't think this will affect him that much. Okay, moving on to the unknown update. So what they've done with unknown, I don't mind actually. So they've increased the additional time added to the weakened when injured by a UVX projectile. So this basically means the timer that is started when a UVX projectile initially hits you, and you get that, best thing to call it is mind fog, that goes away by looking by the killer. That's basically been extended. Next, they've increased the movement speed recovery after teleporting. I think this could have used a slight buff, but otherwise it was fine. I personally didn't notice it too much, but yeah, that's a welcome sight to see. They've increased camera vertical range, which I'll show you below. So this is what it now looks like, making orbital shots a lot easier. I've actually seen a few cases of this before this change, where you wouldn't be able to hit the orbital strike because it's just such a weird angle. And they've adjusted several of his add-ons. Whether they've done this because of these changes or because they were going to do them anyway, I don't think it matters, but it will be interesting to see what add-ons they've actually changed. Again, not expecting any big changes. And then we have his dev note down here. The unknown is largely considered to be fun to play as and against, and we want to preserve that while adapting to the current state of gameplay. We've buffed the UVX slightly, while also taking what we've learned from the animatronic to allow for orbitals, improving UVX aiming, and making for even more fun gameplay. Okay, that's good. It's also likely no surprise that blurry photo is one of the most used add-ons for the unknown, given the importance of speed recovery. To help create an opportunity for more add-on experimentation, we've converted a portion of this add-on into a base kit buff, while also doing a pass on other add-ons that are due for some adjustments. This will be interesting to see, and I have nothing against this. So moving on, the Dark Lord update. So what they've done here is basically slightly reduce the Hellfire cooldown. So this is a buff, increase total Hellfire pillars by 1. This is a buff as well. So those pillars of fire you see coming out of the ground, there's now an extra range on that, an extra one. However, they have reduced his Hellfire charge movement speed, which I think was a problem before, unless you're really good at predicting the survivor's movement. So this is a buff. And then slightly increased slowdown time after casting the Hellfire, again a buff. Overall, it'll be interesting to see how this plays out. I don't play the Dark Lord that good, although I've heard he's really good, so maybe this will make me play him and see how the changes are. Next, his wolf form. So they've increased Pounce attack charge time and also increased Scent Orb spawn time. So next for wolf form, they've increased his Pounce attack charge time, so a slight nerf, and increases Scent Orb spawn time, a slight buff. Again, no actual times on this, so we'll have to see in the PTB how this has changed. I don't imagine it's changed too much though. And then next, the bat form, increased movement friction to make flying easier to control. That's fine. Adjusted his add-ons as well. Again, whether this is due to these changes or just a seasonal change they've done. And then the dev note here is Vampire Form is slightly less oppressive in short loops where movement slowdown has less of an impact, and toning down Wolf Form's mobility. Vampire Form is slightly less oppressive in short loops where movement slowdown had less of an impact, and toning down Wolf Form's mobility, which has been outclassing some dash killers. On the flip side, you'll find Bat Form easier to control in tighter spaces and can use Hellfire slightly more frequently and reach further with it. So I think in maps like Raccoon City this will help a lot. Moving on from the Dark Lord, we have the Ghoul. All they've done here is change when grabbing a survivor on the other side of a vault with Kagune Leap. The survivor is released at the start of the Ghoul's vault instead of the end, so start of the animation instead of the end. This does mean that they'll gain more distance, but other than that I don't see this being a problem, especially for the Ghoul, who can make up a lot of distance very quickly. And then onto the dev note, it's no secret that it's been a common pain point for survivors to be locked in place when hit with a Kagune Leap grab attack across a vault. Survivors shouldn't have to wait for the Ghoul to finish their vault before being able to move again, so we've removed this tech. The only change to the Oni, and it's a minor one, is hooking a survivor now spawns more blood orbs. This is good, they've buffed it, and they've only buffed this because of the anti-tunneling update, as we'll see in the dev note. We understand that with the changes we're making to address slugging, you may as well have put the anti-tunneling as well. This will impact the Oni slightly, so we want to mitigate this by turning hook survivors into a greater source of power gauge buildup. The Oni is rewarded with more quickly snowballing power by hooking. Okay, next, and the funniest part of this, we have the perk updates. They have updated various perks, and that's it. Obviously, we'll get to see the actual changes in the live balance preview on Discord, where they'll obviously dig into the details of these perk changes and follow that up with patch notes, where we'll actually get the numbers. But basically, they've had to do this because of all the changes they've made in the updates listed above. Obviously, as it says, in addition to the general perk balance updates you can expect each release, we've also made a number of adjustments to account for the new systems coming to Dead by Daylight this update, specifically relating to slugging and tunneling. So a lot of these perk updates are just because of the slugging and tunneling updates, while there are some perk balance updates that would have come out anyway, which would have been nice to see here. But again, I guess we'll have to wait next Tuesday for the PTB preview on Discord, which again I'd hope to cover. And as you can see, that's it until next time, the Dead by Daylight team. So before I get to my overall opinion on this update and summarizing it, I just like to point out some of the negativity caused around this update. I think a lot of survivors are more than fine with this, as I don't think it impacts them at all, and obviously this is mainly only impacting the killers. With that being said, I think this has split the killer community quite a lot. I've seen a lot of killers that have been pushed more towards leaving Dead by Daylight, some that already have, thinking that this change is going to make playing killers that aren't S tier, A tier impossible against slow start killers, stealth killers, trapper killers. It's going to be a lot harder to play, and most of them are gone, you know what, I'm going to swap games, I'm going to go and play something different, I'm not going to deal with this. I'm not one of those people yet, I'll see how it is, but I'll stick with playing Dead by Daylight, although I think in the end these changes will suck. And just to highlight that, I'm going to show some of the forum responses. My god, they did it, they turned him into a dash killer. Yep, that was my reaction, although I don't mind the actual changes they've done to his tiers, if you get what I mean. We've got here the survivor hand holding is strong with this one. Down here we have Dead by Daylight is survivor side. Yep, buff chase killer perks please. Anyway, that was just a few examples. A few hours after this update dropped, which would have been yesterday for me, when I was very tired, and that's why I didn't make a video on it, and why I'm so late to making the video. I actually went straight to the Discord after watching a few videos on this update done by some content creators. A lot of the reactions on Discord were negative, even if they did come from killer mains. I think killer mains are the best people to ask about this, seeing as they'll know best how it's going to affect them. I also think, to be completely honest, none of the devs have actually played killer or have played test this before it goes into the PTB. And it shows with some of the changes. I'd like to think, after that being said, that they'd realise some of these changes aren't going to work, and especially after the PTB, maybe cut some of the changes, or at least I hope postpone this update so that they can more properly and in depth work it out, and hopefully consult with the Dead by Daylight community. And it would be cool to see killer content creators having their opinion on some of these, but at the end of the day, they are the developers of the game. They'll do what they want, and unfortunately Behaviour don't have the best reputation when it comes to appeasing the community, especially the killer community. Although, with that being said, I'd like to say with the Slugging Reduction update, I don't mind most of this. 90 seconds in certain situations, and in certain situations anyway, regardless of the time, I think will put a killer into the squeeze. Whether this will make for some fun situations or just really annoying situations, we'll have to wait to see, but I think it's going to be the latter, being that it will piss many killers off. The tunneling reduction update, I'd majorly rework this, if not scrap it completely, and think of a different way to punish tunneling, especially not just accidental tunneling or using it as a viable strategy. Next, the Elusive status effect. I don't mind this, it's a nice status effect to see. It's going to make a lot of Survivor add-on descriptions more streamlined, as it says. The Tomes update, it's nice to see there's more lore for the game. The Shape, I don't mind what they've done with his modes, I just think this looks a bit silly, but otherwise it will be a nice feature. Although saying that, killers like Chucky, who basically have this feature just changed a bit, they could have made it a bit more original, and also this is just basically basic coup de grace. And then next, the Clown, the Unknown, the Dark Lord, the Ghoul, the Oni. I think these are just updates and balances that would have done anyway, and I don't really mind all these updates. Again, it's going to be fun to play each of these individually and see how it changed. And then the perk updates as well. I'll do my best to follow Tuesday on Discord, and obviously when the numbers actually come out, seeing how this will affect it. So to finish off this video, I'd like to say that I'll be playing the PTB, hopefully doing a few videos of it, as long as with the 2v8 mode, which at this current moment has 10 days left. Also, if I have time, I'd like to squeeze in some Michael Myers Tombstone gameplay before it gets completely removed. I'll do my best, and hopefully I'll be pumping out some more videos for you guys. But yeah, this has been my reactions. I'd like to say, sorry if I've been a bit monotone, I'm a bit tired. I'll try and get some more videos pumped out for you guys. Hopefully it won't take too long editing this, so I can get it out as fast as possible. Not that I'm expecting too many people to see it, but I think I'd give my unique approach. Anyway, that's it for this video. If you liked it, make sure to like. If you want, subscribe. I know I don't have a lot of videos out yet, but hopefully in time I'll get some more pumped out for you guys, and it's some of the content I like. I hope you all have a good day, and goodbye.
We have such sights to show you.